We will read the para, okay, and then we will discuss it. So today, I think Sunki has not been reading for quite a long time.
Right.
Yeah. So today maybe you can read, no? Okay.
Yes, I will read.
Yeah. Okay. So how big is it? About 1.25 page. So we can do that.
Okay. So,
After we
but
finish, I will tell you what he has said in the previous para so that we get the connection. Okay.
okay. Mhm.
Go ahead, read.
But an approach from the material end of existence cannot give us any certitude of validity for this hypothesis or, for that matter, for any other explanation of nature and her procedure. The veil cast by the original inconscience is too thick for the mind to pierce, and it is behind this veil that is hidden the secret origination of what is manifested. There are, there are seated the truth and powers underlying the phenomena and the process that appear to us in the material front of nature. To know with great certitude, we must follow the curve of evolving consciousness until it arrives at a height and largeness of self-enlightenment in which the primal secret is self-discovered. For presumably it must evolve, must eventually bring out what was held from the beginning by the occult original consciousness in things of which it is a gradual manifestation. In life, it would be clearly hopeless to seek for the truth, for life begins with a formulation in which consciousness is still submental, and therefore, to us as mental beings, appears as inconscient or at most subconscious, and our own investigation into this stage of life, studying it from outside, cannot be more fruitful of the secret truth than our examination of matter. Even when mind develops in life, its first functional aspect is a mentality involved in action, in vital and physical needs and preoccupations, in impulses, desires, sensations, emotions, unable to stand back from these things and observe and know them. In the human mind, there is the first hope of understanding, discovery, of free comprehension. Here, we might seem to be coming to the possibility of self-knowledge and word knowledge. But, in fact, our mind can at first only observe facts and processes, and for the rest, it has to make deductions and inferences, to construct a hypothesis, to reason, to speculate. In order to discover the secret of consciousness, it would have to know itself and determine the reality of its own being and process. But as in animal life, the emerging consciousness is involved in vital action and movement. So, in human being, mind consciousness is involved in its own whirl of thoughts, an activity in which it is carried on without rest and in which its very reasonings and speculations are determined in their tendency, trend, conditions by its own temperament, mental turn, past formation, and line of energy, inclination, preference, an inborn natural selection. We do not freely determine our thinking according to the truth of things. It is determined for us by our nature. We can indeed stand back with a certain detachment and observe the workings of the mental energy in us. But it is still only its process that we see and not any original source of our mental determinations. We can build the theories and hypotheses of the process of mind, but a veil is still there over the inner secret of ourselves, our consciousness, our total nature.
Yeah. Okay. This is a very interesting para, what he's saying. In fact, all paras are interesting. So we'll go back to what he has said. So to get you the basic, I'll do one thing, I'll do two things. First of all, I'll read out the previous para, the summary of the previous para. Then we'll discuss what problem he is tackling here. Okay, so the previous para, what he has said is like this. Mind influences body at a higher level, just as body dominates mind at a lower level. Okay, mind As you keep going higher and higher, mind gets more and more power over the body. But at the lower level, just as an animal, the body is dominating mind. Okay? So, but finally, it is spirit that is master of matter and is slowly emerging from the dark, tenebrous substance of matter. It then becomes possible to conceive of a divinized body, a supramentalized matter. We have lifted, we have lifed matter. We have injected life into matter. And then what you get? You get a combination of matter and life, insects, animals, etc. Then we have mentalized matter, brain. Consciousness has been put into lifed matter. Then we have men. That's a brain. Okay. Then, if that is so, then why not supramentalized matter, the divine body? That's what he's saying. If we are going on injecting the higher levels of consciousness into the lower, and then we see a fantastic change, then why not? That is spirit itself will enter into the body. Why should we deny that? That's what he's asking. Okay. Now he is going from the what he is discussing in this para is, when science is looking at the origin of life, it sees that it is coming from matter. Okay. So then he is also seeing that consciousness is also coming from matter. So everything, the origin seems to be matter. But there is a problem there. If matter is the origin, matter is pure force, pure energy. Science is telling you very clearly that matter is energy. Okay. E is equal to mc square. It's only energy. And energy is, without consciousness, it's a force. And that means there should be laws that operate. It must operate according to laws. But funnily enough, we see that laws are being broken all the time. Okay, there is a choice. There is a fancy chance that is taking place in nature. That we also discussed now. That is a cat should produce a same cat. That should be the law. But it is not doing that. It is producing 5 different types of cats. Okay, so there is a chance. There is an element of choice, and choice implies consciousness. So it cannot be only force. So when you look, like a scientist looks at matter and says matter is the origin of everything, there is a problem. We can't understand how that problem is. So he says, instead of looking at the lower end, shall we start looking at the higher end? That he has also expressed earlier, that let us see, it is force. When we think that force is the originator of everything in the physical world, then we have a little problem. So let's examine the other possibility. Let's examine whether consciousness is the origin. And so let us see how consciousness is slowly arising. First of all, there is life, which is a consciousness superior to matter. Then there is mind, which is a consciousness superior to life. So why should we? Let's go higher up and see from where it is coming. That's what he's discussing in the para. Okay. So he's climbing from one level to another level to see which is the origin of all this mystery of this universe. Okay. So, the basic question of all philosophy is 3 things. What is this universe? From where has it come? That's the first question. You look at the universe and say, who has created this universe? What is the origin of this universe? From where has it come? There seems to be so much of order and so much of mystery in it. I want to know what is the origin of the universe. Number 1. Number 2, where am I? I am an individual. From where have I come? Okay, my parents have given me birth, but I am not my parents. I am separate and I have a consciousness of my own. What is the purpose of life? Why have I come into this physical world? Okay, so this is the second question. And the third question, what is the origin of all this? My mind is telling me that there is a creator. So who is this creator? How can I know him? So these are the 3 fundamental questions of philosophy which every philosophy has to deal with. Science also is an attempt at understanding the origin of things, but it is still struggling. Okay, it is going outwards into nature to understand, but the yogi goes inwards to understand, and he understands much quicker. So this is what Srimad is discussing here in this. Let's have a look at it. But an approach from the material end of existence cannot give us any certitude of validity for this hypothesis, or for that matter, for any explanation of nature and a procedure. We have examined the possibility, the hypothesis that consciousness is producing But we see that even consciousness is not satisfying enough. So we have to go even higher up. Let's start looking more and more. Let's explore more and more. That's what he's saying. Okay. For that matter, any explanation of nature and a procedure. Then the veil cast by the original inconscience is too thick for the mind to pierce, and it is behind this veil that is hidden the secret origination of what is manifested. Okay? So we have to find out the secret of all this. And the veil is there, even the scientists can't deny the veil, because in matter, life is there. Life is coming out of matter. But it is veiled. I don't see life in matter. But now when it has come out, I can see life and matter. Okay, so similarly, there is a veil. So that veil is the inconscience. The scientist may not call it inconscience, but he can see it as a veil. Okay. The veil cast by the original inconscience. The original inconscience, the dark origin of things, apparent origin of things in below matter even. Even matter is, there is consciousness in matter, but in conscience almost totally zero. You can never say that it is fully zero, because if it is zero, it can't produce anything. So it is not really zero. It is, if you want to put it in mathematical terms, consciousness is there in inconscience 0.000001, but that 1 is there. Okay. So now, it is too thick for the mind to pierce, and it is behind this veil that is hidden the secret origination of what is manifested. Srimdo makes some statements which you have to take and then say, okay, we accept, and then we'll see whether it is convincing afterwards. So, mind has to pierce, and is behind this veil that is hidden the secret origination of what is manifested. There are seated, there, where? In the mind planes of consciousness, are seated the truths and powers underlying the phenomena and process that appear to us in the material front of nature. What we see in nature is only process. We see the how of things. We don't see the why of things. We don't see the origin. Okay? To know with greater certitude, we must follow the curve of evolving consciousness until it arrives at a height and largeness of self-enlightenment in which the primal secret is self-discovered. So he's saying, we are seeing very clearly that there is an ascent. Life is coming out of matter, and out of life also is coming out mind. So why should we stop at mind? Let's keep exploring even further beyond mind. Then we might get the secret. Okay? Actually, this is what happened to Sriranda also. And he knew theoretically that the origin is the supermind, which is something much higher than the normal mind. But when he was thinking, that's why there's a little confusion between overmind and supermind. But as soon as the overmind got manifested in him, he knew that it is not the supermind yet. That's why he withdrew, and he put all his effort to get the supermind. Okay? He was experiencing supermind, but he did not make it an absolute permanent reality in the body. That he did not do. Okay? But it was coming, bits and pieces. He was in touch with it. Okay? So, so there he's saying, let's go higher up. So this is what in the next several paras he will discuss. The physical mind, the vital mind, the pure mind, the higher mind, and one by one the other minds he will explore and see where is the secret. Let us see. Okay. To know with greater certitude, we must follow the curve of evolving consciousness. That's what he's saying. Let's keep going higher and higher until it arrives at a height and largeness of self-enlightenment in which the primal secret is discovered. Maybe as we keep going higher and higher, we will discover the secret and the origin of things. For presumably, it must evolve. Now, note the word presumably. It is still a hypothesis. We don't know. We are in ignorance. We are trying. So let us see. Down we found that we are not able to understand. So let's see the up. Let's go up and see. So that's what he's saying. For presumably, it must evolve. Must eventually bring out what was held from the beginning by the occult original consciousness in things, of which it's a gradual manifestation. The original consciousness is there in matter, and it is gradually manifesting itself. So let us allow the manifestation. Let's keep going to the origin to see where is the origin of all this. Now, first of all, there is life. In life, it would be clearly hopeless to seek for the truth. Why? Because life begins with a formulation in which consciousness is still sub-mental. We know that there is a consciousness higher than the animal consciousness. So it cannot be found there. It is lower than normal mind, okay, in which consciousness is sub-mental. And therefore, to us, as mental beings, appears as inconscient or at most subconscious. And our own investigation into this stage of life, studying it from the outside, cannot be more fruitful of the secret truth than our examination of matter. We have examined matter and found that it's impossible to explain anything. When we come to life also, there is a little consciousness there, but still we are not able to understand anything. And we know that there is something higher than life. The consciousness of life, there is something even higher. Mental consciousness is there. Then he's saying, even when mind develops in life, okay, now that's interesting. First of all, life is developing in matter, producing animals. Then mind is developing in life in animals and producing mental consciousness. When mind develops in life, okay, it's interesting, in life, its first functional aspect is a mentality involved in action. So, Sri always gives huge, very detailed description. Sometimes he uses one word, but sometimes he uses a whole phrase. So, its first functional aspect is a mentality involved in action. I usually ask the students to identify what he's talking about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 words. First functional aspect is a mentality involved in action. Now, this is the physical mind. The physical mind is the one that interprets all your senses. The senses are coming through your physical senses, eyes, ears, nose, throat, everything. But that's all. That's its function, physical mind. First functional aspect of a mentality involved in action, in vital and physical needs and preoccupations, in impulses, desires, sensations, emotions, unable to stand back from these things and observe them. There you are. So, in other words, the consciousness in life that is emerging cannot separate itself from life. This is what he's saying. It is involved in life. It is mixed completely. The consciousness is not separate from life. They are one. Now at the higher level, mind also when it comes, let's see what he's saying, okay? Then in the human mind, there is the first hope of understanding because we can think, we can look at the cause of things. So there is a possibility of knowing the secret of existence. Is that possible? That's what he's examining. In the human mind, there is the first hope of understanding, discovery, a free comprehension. Here we might seem to be coming to the possibility of self-knowledge and world knowledge. Maybe I can know my own origin and I can know the origin of the world, okay? Because I am able to think. And if I think and sufficiently think loudly, largely, I may be able to find the origin of things. Okay? He says, hope of understanding. But can it? It can't. Because just as consciousness in the animal is mixed with life and cannot extricate itself separately, exactly in the same way, in man, the mental consciousness is involved in the thoughts. In other words, man normally 90% of the time is unable to separate the thinker from the thought. He thinks they are only one. The thinker is thinking, but you don't think that I am the thinker and I am thinking, thoughts are coming into me. Normally it doesn't happen. Okay? Just as the consciousness can look at the body and feel the body to be separate. You can also, to a certain extent, look at your vital and say, I am looking at my emotions. They seem to be separate from me. But it is much more difficult to look at your thoughts and say they are separate from me. But when that happens, that's a turning point. When the thinker is able to separate himself from the thoughts and watch his own thoughts, then he is beginning to get the Purusha consciousness. And he is watching Prakriti in action. But there is one thing. When I look at my body, yesterday I had an injury. I am seeing it even while it is getting injured. I am looking at the body. Can I look at my emotions? I can look at my emotions after they have occurred. Okay. Sometimes it's possible to even see your emotions while they are occurring. Suppose you are getting angry, you realize, I am getting angry. At the same time, you are able. Now, can the mind do that with the thoughts? 90% of the time, you look at your thoughts after they have occurred. But if you can do that when they are occurring, when the thought is coming, you see the thought coming into you at the same time. That is the separation. Okay? So then you are able to look at your body, look at your vital, look at your mind even. So the thinker has separated himself from the thoughts. Okay? So that's what Sridhar is discussing here. In the human mind, there is the first hope of understanding, discovery, a free comprehension. Here we might seem to be coming to the possibility of self-knowledge and world knowledge. I can know myself and the universe. But in fact, our mind can at first only observe facts and processes, and for the rest it has to make deductions, inferences, to construct hypotheses, to reason, to speculate. What's he describing? He's describing science. Okay? And also those who are thinkers, they look at their own thoughts. A mind can at first only observe facts. Okay? I see facts in the physical world. I see that even psychologically they are facts. I see that I'm getting angry. Process. And for the rest, it has to make deductions, inferences, construct hypotheses, to reason, to speculate. This is exactly what science is doing. It cannot get to the reality of things, but it can speculate. It makes hypotheses, and it goes on theories. Okay, that's why even the best, the relativity theory is a theory. Okay, so you go on. Okay, now there is a theory of consciousness. They are understanding that consciousness is something fundamental. So this is he is describing science. In order to discover the secret of consciousness, it would have to know itself. So consciousness has to know itself. In other words, consciousness must separate itself from its functions. From its, the thinker must separate himself from his thoughts and determine the reality of his own being and process. As in animal life, the emerging consciousness is involved in vital action and movement. So in the human being, the mind consciousness is involved in its own whirl of thoughts. So this means that the thinker is unable to extricate himself separately from his own thoughts. He thinks that he is thinking, he is the thought. Okay? But the idea that he is separate from the thoughts doesn't occur to him very easily. A philosopher, one who is very observant, a thinker, yes, he can do that. It starts. An activity in which it is carried on without rest, and in which its very reasonings and speculations are determined in their tendency, trend, conditions by its own temperament, mental term, past formation and line of energy, inclination, preference, and inborn natural selection. This whole thing is in you put a dash, okay? Srinivas is very fond of these dashes, okay? So after the comma. We do not freely determine our thinking according to the truth of things because we are involved in thoughts. It is determined for us by our nature. So this is the great truth that is there when you discover when you do yoga. When you separate yourself from your own thoughts, you realize that your physical actions are determined by the body. Your vital emotions are determined by the prana. You discover that the mind plane of consciousness, nature, outside nature, universal nature is putting thoughts into your mind. You are not doing anything. You are not the doer. That's what Sridhar is saying. Okay, so is determined for us by our nature. Everything that we have, our actions, our emotions, and our thoughts are only determined by nature. Nature is doing all this to us. We don't realize that. We think that I am doing, but we are not. It is nature that does, and we have to stand back and see. We can indeed stand back with a certain detachment and observe the workings of the mental energy in us. It's possible to look at our own thoughts. It's possible. But it is still only its process that we see and not any original source of our mental determinations. We can build theories and hypotheses of the process of mind, but a veil is still there over the inner secret of ourselves, our consciousness, our total nature. In other words, I am still not being able to come to the origin of things. Okay, so this is what he's saying. And now we have discussed the details. Now I go into the summary of what he has said. Okay, so, but if we start our quest from the bottom at matter, like science, the thick, dense veil of matter does not allow any clear view, nor does life do any better. Even mind, seeming to give knowledge, only gives us the outermost processes of things. Life and mind are too entrenched and involved in matter to be of any help. To know the secret origin of the universe, we have to go to the source above the mind in an evolutionary ascent to the supermind through higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, overmind, and finally supermind. So this is the process of finding the secret of existence. So we have to keep going. Nature has showed us the first three steps. Why not we complete the circuit? That's what he's saying. Okay. In other words, you have to go higher and higher. You have to go on exploring higher and higher. So that's what he says in this para. Shall we go to the next one? Now what he will do, he will go on showing you, if I go from my mind to my higher mind, yes, there's a huge increase in consciousness. But can I still see the source? No. Then I go even higher up. Element mind. Yes, again there is an increase in consciousness. Am I seeing the source? No, I am still confused. I go to the intuitive mind. Then I see the source? No, I don't see the solution yet. I go to the overmind, even higher consciousness, huge amount of light, knowledge, everything. But there is still a problem. I don't know which is the origin of things. Finally, you go into the supermind. Now you know that this is the origin of things. It is supermind, Satchidananda, that has created matter. Matter is creating, it is true, but from the lower end, and it is a dependent reality. The independent reality is supermind at the highest level. Matter is creating, this it's true, but matter is creation of matter is secondary. It is the secondary reality, it's not the primary reality. Okay, that's what he will tell you in the next 2-3 paras. So, shall we? In fact, it happened to Surendra also, na? When he reached the overmind, he knew immediately that there is still a higher, and that's why he withdrew. As I told you, he withdrew. He says this has to be discovered. He knew about it theoretically because Vivekananda had told him in a disembodied condition in jail. When he was in jail, Vivekananda came to him in a disembodied consciousness, and he told him that about the supermind. And in one place he says he went on speaking about the supermind for 15 days. Another place he says more than that. Okay, went on explaining until he had told everything about him. So theoretically, Sri knew about the supermind. Okay, but in his mind there is no clear distinction between supermind and overmind, which he discovered later on. Okay, so we go to the next para. It's only when we follow the yogic process.
Shall I read, Rangada?
Yeah. No, what did you say? I didn't follow. Sorry.
Shall I read it,
Yes,
Gitanjali?
yes, please. Yeah, you can read.
It is only when we follow the yogic process of quieting the mind itself that a profounder result of our self-observation becomes possible. For first we discover that mind is a subtle substance, a general determinate or generic indeterminate, which mental energy, when it operates, throws into forms or particular determinations of itself, thoughts, concepts, percepts, mental sentiments, activities of will, and reactions of feeling, but which, when the energy is quiescent, can live either in an inert torpor or in an immobile silence and peace of self existence. Next, we see that the determinations of our mind do not all proceed from itself, for waves and currents of mental energy enter into it from outside. These take the form in it or appear already formed from some universal mind or from some other minds and are accepted by us as our own thinking. We can perceive also an occult or subliminal mind in ourselves from which thoughts and perceptions and will impulses and mental feelings arise. We can perceive two higher planes of consciousness from which a superior mind energy works through us or upon us. Finally, we discover that that which observes all this is a mental being supporting the mind substance and mind energy. Without this presence, their upholder and source of sanctions, they could not exist or operate. This mental being or Purusha first appears as a silent witness, and if that were all, we would have to accept the determinations of mind as a phenomenal activity imposed upon the being by nature, by Prakriti, or else as a creation presented to it by Prakriti, a world of thought which nature constructs and offers to the observing Purusha. But afterwards, we find that the Purusha, the mental being, can depart from its posture of a silent or accepting witness. It can become the source of reactions, accept, reject, even rule and regulate, become the giver of the command, the knower. A knowledge also arises that this mind substance manifests the mental being, is its own expressive substance, and the mental energy is its own consciousness force, so that it is reasonable to conclude that all mind determinations arise from the being of the Purusha. But this conclusion is complicated by the fact that, from another viewpoint, our personal mind seems to be little more than a formation of universal mind, an engine for the reception, modification, propagation of thought, cosmic thought waves, idea currents, will suggestions, waves of feeling, sense suggestions, form suggestions. It has no doubt its own already realized expression, predispositions, propensities, personal temperament and nature. What comes from the universal can only find a place there if it is accepted and assimilated into the self expression of the individual mental being, the personal prakriti of the Purusha. But still, in view of these complexities, the question remains entire whether all this evolution and action is a phenomenal creation by some universal energy presented to the mental being, or an activity imposed by mind energy on the Purusha's indeterminate, perhaps indeterminable existence, or whether the whole is something predetermined by some dynamic truth of self within and only manifested on the mind surface. To know that, we would have to touch or enter into a cosmic state of being and consciousness to which the totality of things and their integral principle would be better manifest than to our limited mind experience.
Okay, big para, and he is saying that just now we discussed that let's keep going higher and higher to discover the origin of things. Okay, so he is saying at the mental level, can we find? No, we can't, because the mind is involved in thoughts. Our mental consciousness is involved in the thoughts. There is no separation between the thinker and the thing and the thought. Okay. So he says to be able to go higher up, we have to distinguish between the thinker and the thought. So we have little time. So I'll go back to the beginning of the para. We'll discuss that. We may not be able to finish it because it's a very interesting para, what he's saying. We'll see what he's saying. It's only when we follow the yogic process of quieting the mind. So this is a concept that yogis know, but the others don't know. And even the yogi discovers that when he makes himself quiet and calm, then he realizes that there is a consciousness higher than the mind. Okay? So he realizes that. But the scientists have not yet. They still feel that mental consciousness is the highest. Now they are beginning to understand that no, it's not true. Because so many phenomena, so many data is coming, what is called near-death experience. When you have near-death experience, your consciousness continues to exist independent of body. So now the scientists know that there is a consciousness which is not dependent on the brain. So they know that there is a mental consciousness and the thoughts that occur are different. Okay, so this they know now, but they still not come to the actual origin of things yet. They're struggling. It's only when we follow the yogic process of quieting the mind itself that a profound result of our self-observation becomes possible. For first, we discover that mind is a subtle substance. Now, that's a very interesting thing. Understand this perfectly well. Mind is not something abstract. It's a subtle substance. Like water, thick ice. Okay, it is matter. Then water can become water. It can become very, very fluid. Okay, that becomes our life. Then the water can also become water vapor. It's a substance, but it is that. So exactly our minds also is a substance. Okay, and what is the substance actually? People ask. We are speaking of substance, but what is the substance? At the highest level, the substance is Sat, Chit, Shakti, Ananda. But these are all four different things, but they are one at the highest level. It's a substance which is conscious of itself, which has got force and which has also got enjoyment. But as it keeps coming down, we have to apply the principle of the one becoming the many, so they separate. Substance becomes separate, consciousness becomes separate, life becomes separate, and matter becomes separate. Okay, so it is this. You can think of it as consciousness becoming dense. You can think of substance becoming dense. You can think of even ananda becoming dense and losing its own character. Okay, so for first we discover that mind is a subtle substance, a general determinate or generic indeterminate. Now, understand this. General determinate or generic indeterminate. Okay, so general determinate, okay, the C is the determinant and it is determining waves. Okay, or if you think of life, it produces life forms. So the generic indeterminate is that which produces general determinates. Okay, so I give you another 2-3 examples, then you will understand the differences. That is, let us take molten metal. Okay, that is the indeterminate. Generic. Generic means it is going to generate forms. Okay, generic. Okay, it's very interesting the word even in Sanskrit you have the word jan, to produce. Okay, janma, all these generate. Okay, even the English word genesis, the origin of things, that it produces. So generic means it is producing. What is
Also,
producing?
is genre also?
Huh?
Genre.
Huh? Huh?
Genre, genre. It's also different.
Yes, yes, that's right. So everywhere the word jan is there. So this is what Sridhar is saying. First of all, there is a indeterminate, which is producing determinates, general determinates. Okay. As I said, life is producing 5 different types of things. Normally, if I had a board, I would have put down. Okay, it is producing. Life is producing vertebrates and invertebrates. Okay, I'm going a little more into detail. So, vertebrates and invertebrates. Vertebrates and invertebrates are the general determinate of what? Life, which is the indeterminate. It can take many, many forms. Okay, so but it is generic. It can generate forms. Okay, then we come to the vertebrates. The vertebrates itself again can be considered an indeterminate because from there it produces 5 different types of vertebrates. Okay, we know that. No? It produces mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. All have got vertebrates. So the 5 vertebrates are the general determinates of the generic indeterminate, which is the family of vertebra. Okay, so you can think of it in that way. Or the other one, if you look at also the invertebrates. They produce again 8 different types of things, and now they may have discovered even more. Mollusks and insects, they don't have any vertebra. Okay, so that is one way of looking at things. The other way is, as I told you, take molten metal. It's a generic indeterminate because it is itself formless, but it can produce many forms. It can produce steel sheets, it can produce steel wires, it can produce steel ingots. So those would be the general determinate. Now, the steel sheet would be a general, it's a general determinate, but that itself can also become an indeterminate because the sheet can be molded into so many different types. It can be made into it can be made into a knife, it can be made into a hammer, it can be made into even a body of a car. Okay, so this process is there all the time. That which is formless starts making forms, and each form again can make separate forms, and it goes on endlessly. That's
Rangada,
it. Yeah, chapter.
Rangada,
Yeah, tell me.
Plato calls it the real idea, no? The same
The
thing.
real idea is the origin. The real idea is the origin of things, just like the blueprint of a building. Okay. It all starts at the highest level, okay, at the supermind level. All the things are all contained as seeds there, and finally, as it keeps coming down, it becomes indeterminates become determinates. Then again, those determinates become indeterminates for that which is below it. So, if anything you take, above it is the indeterminate. Below it is the determinant. So there's no end to this process. But at the highest level, the divine is the most indeterminate because you can't say he is this, he is that. You can't give him any features. That's the reason why, if you think of the divine as omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, which seems wonderful. Okay, I am describing God. He is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. Ah, that's the idea of God. Siddhanta says wrong. You are not allowing him to become determinate. You are not allowing him to become weak. You are not allowing him to become ignorant. He becomes all that. He is capable of that also. So that is why he is the most indeterminate. Okay. So this is the idea in the Advaita philosophy. The most indeterminate, the unknowable. Okay. So this is what he's describing here. It's very interesting what he's saying. So we have to go deep into the thing and see what he's saying. We have already lost, we have got only 3 minutes left, but basically I've told you what he's saying. Okay? So what do we see? We see that where our thoughts are the waves of the sea. Okay? Our one thought is coming from where? It is coming from the general sea of thought, of mentality. Our thought is a small form of the general sea of mentality. So there is a world of mental substance, and that mental substance is a sea, which is the indeterminate, and the thoughts that are coming out of it are the determinates. So all the thoughts that we have, they are the determinates. So our thoughts are not the ultimate reality. They are all coming from the sea of mentality, the sea of the world of mind. Okay? That's what he's saying. And now he's saying, we have got 2 minutes, so just going into a little more. For first, we discover that mind is a subtle substance. That subtle substance is a mental sea, okay, the mental ocean, which is a general determinate or generic indeterminate. Why is he saying that mentality is a general determinate? Because it is coming from Satchidananda, which is the indeterminate. And Satchidananda is creating determinates. What are the first determinates? Ether, air, fire, water, earth. They are the determinates. Okay. Ether is the subtlest substance. Then air is the next substance which is slightly thicker. Then we have come to fire, then we come to water, and then we come to. It is not fire, water, earth. Huh? They are only descriptive of the density of the substance. And what is that substance? Again, we go back to Satchit, Shakti, Ananda. It can be any of them. Okay. So it's a little difficult for the mind to conceive, but that's what he's saying. So, general determinate is a sea of mentality. Generic indeterminate is generic indeterminate is a sea of mentality. Generic because it can generate. Okay. And general determinate, that which has been did. Our thoughts are general determinates. But why is saying that our thoughts are general determinate? Because there are so many different types of thoughts. And he is telling you that. Okay. Particular determinations of itself, thoughts, concepts, percepts, mental sentiments, activities of will and reactions of feeling, but which, when the energy is quiescent, can live either in an inert torpor or in an immobile silence and a peace of self-existence. So here also he is giving you three different types of things. He is telling you it can be an inert torpor, okay, or it can be an immobile silence, or it can be a piece of self-existence. This seems, we need to go into this because he's saying, so we'll see what he's saying, because this is a very interesting sentence what he's saying. Torpor, immobile silence, and a piece of self-existence. Okay, this is. The torpor that he's talking about is a phenomenon in yoga which is called jadavat. Okay. In other words, the human being, when you see him, he will be absolutely like a stone. He is not reacting to anything at all. He does not eat, he does not bath, he does not do anything. He just sits. He is a state of torpor, jadavat, unmattavat, pishachavat, balavat. These phenomena can happen when the consciousness goes up, okay, and the body is left in a torpor. So this is what he is talking about. Then, but it can be elsewhere. It can be an immobile silence. It can be far superior. Okay, there is a case in Tamil Nadu. We have many cases are there, but in Tamil Nadu we had an interesting case recently also. He passed away in 1988. I forget his name now, but I can tell you how later on. He was like that. He was absolutely jadavat. So people realize that he is living in a higher consciousness because he is not even eating. So when they give him food, he eats. When you give him a bath, he takes very quietly without any, absolutely like a stone. Okay, jadavat. And if you give him even a cigarette, yeah, he will start smoking. If you give him milk, he will drink. If you give him wine, he will drink. Okay, jadavat. Okay, absolutely like a stone. But the consciousness is at a higher level, but there is no connection between the higher and the lower. So this is what Sindh is saying, torpor. Okay, or it can be immobile silence. You can experience the higher mind, the what is called the nirvana. Okay, it's a far better condition because you are fully conscious. But there's something which can be even better than that, a piece of self-existence. Okay? So it can be all these three things. Now the time has come, we have crossed. So next time we'll discuss these three things more detailed manner. Torpor or an immobile silence and a piece of self-existence. Okay? It can be all these things. When your consciousness rises, you can get the phenomena of jadavat, unmattavat, pishachavat, balavat. So that's a torpor. And the immobile silence and peace of self-existence, nirvana, or the witness consciousness. So we stop here today and we'll take up next time. We'll finish the para. But see, every word, there's a whole thing to be discussed behind that. He just used one word, okay? He's saying torpor. But what is it? It is the state of physical, vital, mental inactivity. Okay? So that's the Jadavat. Jadavat. Okay, so we stop here today and we'll take up, I'm just putting, okay, page 322. Right? So first of all, I must put Life Divine, PP, and we will start from that is tomorrow, no? We'll take it up tomorrow. When your consciousness goes up, these three things can happen. Actually, it's not three, he's describing only two because he's saying and, immobile silence and peace of existence. So, nirvana or the other phenomena, that can also happen. And if you want, I'll try and get that fellow who was like that. I can even send a picture of him to you. There's a whole video. I'll give you the video clip. Okay, it's very interesting because he has discussed in Life Divine. He has discussed also in synthesis. Jadavat, Unmatavat, Pishachavat, Balavat. Okay, these four phenomena can happen, and there are many cases like that. If the consciousness is not fully conscious, your rising into the next level can slightly disorient you. That disorientation is there, but the consciousness is at a very high level. Okay, so then I've lost the. So I put the page, so I think we'll have to do it next time. I think I'll remember in the middle of the para. Okay, so Life Divine, pp.322, middle of the para, I did not. Okay, au revoir everybody. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Rangada.
Okay.